Welcome to the Audiobook Lovin Series, a month-long event celebrating the authors and narrators that bring romance stories to life. Listen along as Viviana, Enchantress of Books, interviews your favorite writers and voices, share special guest posts, and stay tuned for some special information at the conclusion of the episode.
Hi everyone, today I have the pleasure of chatting with guest narrator Carly Robbins, aka CJ Bloom. Welcome to the Audiobook Lovin Series, Carly. How are you doing today?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I am doing excellent. I'm so excited to be here. You are such a support system to our entire community. So I'm really just honored that you asked me to be a part of this and to share my story and my experience, and for you to, bring and introduce me to all of your listeners if they don't know who I am, but also just your wonderful support for our community. I really thank you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that very much. So it's a great community when it comes down to the listeners and things like that. And I'm happy to be a little bit of that bridge between the listener and the narrators, the authors. Especially when this first started, there wasn't a whole lot of social media. So now I'm still a bit of the hookup girl. Like, I hook you up. But it's a great honor to talk to you. So I appreciate you taking the time to be here. You have been on my wish list, so thank you. It's like check mark off. But now you're stuck with me because now once you're here, you're like family, and you're always here. So
I love that.
Good.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Oh, of course. Yeah, no, it's all about community and loving on each other. So and being positive in this world. But why don't we start with having you tell us a little bit about yourself, how long you've been narrating, how you got into it, and also the whole thing with the pseudonym, how that came about.
You got it. Okay, so a little bit about me. I always wanted to be an actress from a very young age. I was involved in musical theater growing up. I still love musical theater. I live in New York City now, Brooklyn technically, and love to see shows still. It's a big part of my life and my heart, even though I didn't pursue that as a career. But that's really where my love of art and being a performer came from. And I had wanted to move to New York to be an actress, to be a stage actress, and just felt as if it was very challenging. There's no actor out there that says it is. And so this is not a story that's never been told before. Oh my goodness, it's difficult to become an actress. No, everybody knows it. And it is just as hard as you think it's going to be. And yet something still draws you to it. So I, came to New York, would get a show, and to get into a stage production, it's years in the making because it takes so long, and then everybody breaks up when it's done, and then you don't hear from those people forever. And so it's very hard to build a community and consistent work based off of that. And so I would sort of just felt like I wasn't making any inroads. I started to produce and write some of my own things, and started working in voiceovers and commercials, and doing a couple of what they call under fives, where it's you have 5 lines or under on soap operas when they all existed in New York. And I loved that. That was a consistent gig. I would go once a month, sometimes twice a month if I was lucky. And that was a lot of my life for many, many years. But I didn't feel as if I was sort of moving up in the world. But every audition that I went on, everybody said to me, you must work a lot in voiceovers. And I had maybe done 1 or 2 voiceovers, or would go out for things, but randomly, and probably non-union, to be quite honest. And once you hear that enough, you realize that maybe they're hearing something, right? Because the way that you talk never sounds the same as what everybody hears. And so I think there must have been something in my voice. And I started to lean into that and started to seek out friends of mine who I knew worked in the business, and then trying to learn as much as I could. And I happened to be having a lunch with a friend of a friend of a friend, somebody I don't even remember why we agreed to have lunch. She wasn't particularly close to me. And we were just talking about where we were in our careers or things like that. And I was deeply frustrated, felt like I hadn't sort of made any work consistently, was proud of the stuff I was able to do, but maybe was looking to change gears. And she was like, oh my God, I know a guy, he's an engineer, and he's got all this voiceover work stuff. You should totally give him a call. And I was like, okay, that sounds totally suspect. Right?
I know this guy.
I know this guy. He's got tons of work. Okay, sure. Yeah, no problem. They're just going to hire me. And lo and behold, she was correct. She put me in touch with him. And that was Pete Rowan, who is an engineer who's been working in this business for a very long time. And he has Rowan Studios in Queens. And he actually replied to me And at first was like, okay, yeah, who are you kind of
Yeah.
thing. And said, they just started this website, ACX. Why don't you go on it and sort of learn a little bit, newbie, who do you think you are kind of person. And I had grown up listening to audiobooks, and it never even once entered my mind that I could do it in my career as an actor. And I have no idea why. It just wasn't even anywhere in there as like a thing that I could do. And so he sent me to ACX, and I was like, oh my God, what is this world? And it was like, it was like jazz hands. It was in its infancy stages. So there weren't that many people on it. And it was like big authors who had just like retained their audiobook rights, because at that point, this was back in 2013, I think. And at that point, Audible was still in its infancy, but it had been purchased by Amazon. So they were sort of flooded with, having the independent arm of Kindle publishing along with ACX, and all these sort of things were coming together where people were really looking at another opportunity to get their books into another art form. And my first audition, I booked it, and then Pete was like, why don't you come in and do an audition for me? And at the time, Audible had bought, I don't even know how many thousands or hundreds, who knows, old back titles, because they were just trying to put content up. So they would give Pete like a book dump of like 30 books for him to do a month. And then he would sort of have like his merry band of rascals. and he would cast,
you get an audiobook, and you get an audiobook, and you get an audiobook.
Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. I mean, to be fair, these were very great, amazing performers. And he, would audition them and things like that. But so much easier than, nobody was, requesting narrators or things like that. They just wanted to try and get content out. And he would hire me like several times a month. So I kind of learned on the job. So I listened back to some of those early ones, and I'm like, oh, but because it's such a highly technical medium that I just, didn't realize how much, but he really guided me through those first few months. And then I was sort of off and running and couldn't take in enough information to try, because I was like, oh my God, I love this. I love everything about this. And that's sort of where I began. And then I think in that dump, I got my first Tara Civic book. And at the time, most of the other books I had done for him were not in the romance genre. And I believe they were fiction. And I think I did a handful of like nonfiction and some other, maybe I did a couple YA kind of things. And so I wasn't sure sort of like what the romance world was. I don't even think the romance world was then what it is now, that's for sure. And I think he had advised me, you should come up with another name, because there is still something out there, especially if you're doing other voiceover work and going out for soap operas or all these other things. So I was still pursuing a lot of on-camera work and stage work and things. And he was like, the last thing you want is for somebody to look you up and you're associated with like a racy title. And there was a part of me at the time that sort of felt like, racy title, like we're talking about sex here. It's not that big of a deal. Like my sense of like, I don't think I had the language then, because we've only come up with it now, but like sex shaming wasn't a term, but I had felt sort of, I wasn't embarrassed by it. And I was like, I don't think I should be embarrassed, but all right, he knows. And I think I'd spoken to a handful of like other narrators, and they were all like, yeah, we all have pseudos. And I was like, oh, okay. Like just a thing to go along with. And then it was like a funny, like, oh, I have a secret name, kind of thing. And so I came up with the name CJ Bloom. It's really not that exciting. My first name, Carly. My middle name is Joelle. So CJ is where that came from. And Bloom is my mother's maiden name. And no, I don't use it for any of my passwords.
Okay.
Question.
Good.
Yeah, exactly. And I felt like Bloom felt like, like a flower, or like, something
Rose
sort of like, like birds and the bees, sort of like euphemism kind of something, or like imagery. I don't know. I sort of loved it. And that's where CJ Bloom was birthed. But I believe my first title was a Tara Civic, who I have since worked with many times, and talk about a romantic comedy. Oh my God. I don't know if romantic comedy is one of the genres in romance that you gravitate towards, but Utterly Scorched was maybe one of the funniest books that I have ever in my life narrated.
So I don't discriminate when it comes down to genres.
Okay.
But there's some that I'm going, okay, we'll try it. I mean, blue aliens with multiple appendages. I'm like, okay, we'll try it.
It's correct. That's definitely a niche. Definitely a niche. Yeah.
Yep. But I will try anything once, at least. But I do love the romantic comedy because those are, you kind of get a little bit of everything. You get the, the romance part, you get some of the smexy time on the spicy stuff. But you also get that comedy, which is so needed right now.
Oh my goodness, so much. Yes.
And also sometimes like we are that girl that,
Yes.
So
yes.
I'm like, oh I did not know I live a romantic comedy, but thank you.
I mean, there is a reason why everybody knows I carried a watermelon. And it's because everybody has seen Dirty Dancing, and you are that woman where you're like, I carried a watermelon. And then you're like, oh my God, why did I just say I carried a watermelon? We all know what that is. Anyway,
yeah, or we always have, or that hot guy that is also our BFFs, and we're going, shut the fuck up, and we're going, stop it. So
I know, and you sort of like push the personal boundaries of like what friends do, but you're just friends, but you're not, but you are, but you're not. Yeah.
So that's where romance kind of hits the bill, which is also why I love it, because there's something for everybody. So if you do like the aliens with the multiple appendages, or the rom-coms, or the or the paranormal with the different shifters, and the billionaires, there's something for everybody. And it's fun to kind of be able to discover that. And
totally.
And also the language of being able to learn that there is such a thing as potential sex shaming, things that are taboo. Oh, I did not realize I had that kink. Thank you. Didn't know that was called. All right, thanks. And you're like, hey, honey. And so people learn to, be more themselves and accept themselves and try something new and be adventurous. So
yes. I mean, I think in a weird, maybe interesting way, when 50 Shades came out, right, that changed the conversation of power dynamics in couples. That was like a mainstream topic. I don't know when a romance novel has ever done that before. I mean, like, right? And I think that's, I feel like that helped to sort of talk about things happening in the bedroom in a way that you never could have anticipated. So art and genre is very important.
I think that opened up the doors for as many issues as that book has when it comes down to the BDSM community.
Correct.
And also some of the behaviors.
Yes, I wouldn't say that it was representative of any,
but I am grateful for it.
Right.
Yeah. I am grateful that it did open the doors of allowed to have the conversations of all those things and the proper aspect of them as well, but also the, hey, it's okay to talk about sex, and it's okay to tell you what I like and don't like, and you can take it or leave it. And that's about it.
I mean, that's a big deal. That if that's all that it was, if that's the positive that came out, that's still a pretty big deal.
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. And I think it also laid the forefront to what we're currently listening to and reading, and the diversity that we have in it, as from different angles of things, from the different tropes to the different genres to the different styles of writing. Even the audiobook stuff is a different kind of formatting aspect of it that is been around for eons, because there were books on tape.
Yes, but the style has changed. I think that's a big conversation in the narrator community, where there's this sort of like voice of God, or you're just sort of giving like a straight read. I think that's an opinion of some listeners' preference. Like they don't want too much emotion. They don't want too much acting. I put that in air quotes. And then there's another side that wants the full performance. And it's always hard to know, right, what a listener is going to respond to. But I think it allows in this grand spectrum of what a great audiobook performance means. Some people, become a little reductive in their reviews, and they're like, they're always whispering. But then when you're screaming, they're like, you're always screaming, so you can't win.
Well, yeah. And I think that's where it's a good conversation to have with the author prior to them casting, is to figure out what the audience, looks for in their book, in their series, in their world. Do you want someone that is going to be a little bit more godlike voice, voice of God, as far as just telling you the story, and I want someone to read it for me, and that's good enough because everything else on its own? Or do you prefer one to have it be completely acted out as a, to the third balcony kind of a thing? But then also goes into, well, is this dual or single, duet, multicast? And what does that look like? And how does that feel? And I think that we're moving forward to kind of going a little backwards in time to almost like radio show times.
Yeah. No, I totally agree.
It's fun. I love it. But at the same time, I'm going,
Right. It's a new medium that is experiencing what will it be, right? Because it's ever changing. And so I also think, crazy, but like authors aren't really in the performance world for the most part. And so you're asking authors to imagine a performance of their words. And that's a big ask, especially if, depending on how, as a narrator, you get cast. Sometimes you don't have access to the author, or they request not to be in touch. There are so many, complicated relationships of how the project winds up in my calendar, is something that I, get the benefit to record. But there's just so much more to it. And you're so right. Unless people who are listening recognize, like, oh my God, so you have this book, it's set in the South. Do I decide to do an accent or not an accent? Like, that's a big decision. And then do I cast a native or do I not cast a native because I really like this person's voice? So then maybe I don't do an accent, but maybe that was how I wrote it. And like, even just something small like that has really big impact in terms of how the performance goes. And half the time, narrators, when they're entrusted with that, want to make the right decision, but aren't given guidance, to be quite honest. And so I think that comes with experience. So there are some, forums for narrators, or when I meet other narrators at events, that's always a big question. Like they want to do these like big performance choices. And when they ask me, because I don't generally offer advice unless somebody is specific, because I feel like every artist is responsible for their own choices and have reasons for that. But if I am asked, you really come back to the text, which is part of, your acting training, which is, what is the text telling me? If it's not written for an accent, or it's not written specific to something, then you are just doing a generic understanding. And that is what the author is telling you. But sometimes it's hard to tell, so it's always a challenge.
Yeah, especially when romance now, the style for the past couple of years has been that dual POV, where chapter 1, female, chapter 2, hero, chapter 3, heroine. And
or chapter 10 through 20, female, and then end epilogue, male.
Oh God. I'm like, can you just be honest and tell me that he, insert popular name of male narrator is only gonna be doing the epilogue? So I'm not like anxiously waiting to hear him, or like, oh, is this when he's gonna come?
Yes. Me
transparency,
too.
transparency, people, transparency, authors. Yeah, there was a huge backlash a few years ago with one author that was like that. They were the narrator was very popular. It still is. And they were cast in the book, and it was announced, and everybody's like, oh my God, I can't believe he's doing this book. How awesome. Fast forward, and we're like, dude, it's just the epilogue.
I feel like I've been a handful of the books that I've done have had that exact response. It's terrible.
Which I think it's, as if I know it in upfront, I'm fine with it. I think authors are now starting to get a lot better at providing some of that insight, even if it's only in their reader group. But I think it needs to be done more publicly and openly to say that, hey, 90% of this title is in the heroine's POV. Thus, 90% of this book is going to be narrated by the female narrator, and but X amount for like,
but isn't that their challenge? Because they want the male narrators have the bigger star power in the romance community.
That's where we need to start switching the visual, because at the end of the day, it should be about the story. At the end of the day, I want a good story, whether he is an alien with multiple appendages, or the Dom that is also the mafia man who's also the billionaire. I mean, fill in the blanks. Literally, you can do anything nowadays.
I know.
But I want a good story. If I want to hear sexy people, or sexy voices saying sexy things, there's a website for that, with memberships and one-offs. So if that's what you want, that's one thing. But I think that we definitely, as a community, need to switch that mindset that it is a male narrator that is going to be the big draw. And it's the male narrator that, potentially makes it or breaks the book. First of all, it's a genre that is for women, written by women.
I know, isn't that crazy?
Let's support our girls. Hello. And not just say that we're supporting them. Obviously back them up. Put your money where your mouth is in this case, and support them by buying the book. And and trust in the author that they're casting the right narrators or the hero of the narrators, but not rely solely on the big name, insert male name here. Because sometimes I will purposely not buy a book because he's in it, because I'm tired. And not because he's a bad dude, but a girl likes the variety.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
It up,
you know.
And it's happened sometimes with the female narrators too, because there's some out there that, I mean, I love the loyalty authors, I really do, but a range of someone's voice can only go so far, and they're going to start blending in my head, and I'm going to forget what book I'm listening to because it's the same narrators over and over and over again. Mixing it up is okay. Yeah. And I'm huge. I'm like,
no, I hear you.
I will bust out with, damn, when he said that line, and give him credit if he makes me cry because it was an emotional, or, oh my God, that little kid voice. But I'm also going to bust out with, damn, she's sounding like really sultry there, or, oh my God, how she said that line. And it's about having that support across the board. And again, it goes back to, it's about the story. If you're going to just get an audiobook because you want it to sell and you're going to hit any narrator, at that point, you might as well just hit anybody that has a decent voice and have them record in the bathroom. Unpopular opinion, I know. I'm sorry. I said what I said. But it's definitely something that you guys as female narrators have been going through a lot as of late in the past couple of years, where it's all the guys. You know, they can do no wrong, and that's not true. They can do plenty wrong.
Yeah. No, I hear you. It's a strange thing, isn't it? You know, I think in the past year or two, I have definitely, in my own work, been trying to balance with like some other genres and some other styles. I think in the past year, I haven't done quite as many, co-narration, indie author kind of things. I've been, trying to sort of give that balance for that reason, because I do think, just like an actor, you love them in that rom-com or you love them in that thriller, but they don't want to do it again either, because, they've sort of given to that performance. And yet at the same time, it's also a job. And there are also, relationships that one has with an author, and they do love your voice. It's complicated. It's also complicated.
There's a lot of little nuances in there. And I think that that's where it's important to have the conversations with your production company and with the narrator that you're working with, and understand that, girl, I love you, kind of have that, like, I love you, but I'm going to go with this narrator, doesn't mean I love you less, and they're just, fill in the blanks. It's okay to make those decisions. And as a narrator, it's okay for you guys to not want to get typecast in a girl next door, or the fill in the blank kind of a role, and go into something different. It's good, It's important to get that skill set. Also, it's like like any instrument. The more you practice it at different angles, the better you're going to get at it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I hear you. It's also hard because, like with anything, you want to work with your friends and the people because they're going to give you the product that you want. And so maybe you go with a new person, and then that new person isn't so great to work with. And then you get a terrible production, and you're like, see, I should never have gone with that new person.
Absolutely correct. Absolutely.
I feel like everybody's got to weigh the pros and cons as they sort of navigate this really complicated and surprisingly,
rough water sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a surprisingly, like a stressful job, because recording takes so many hours that it's challenging to kind of make sure that you're getting through the project itself in a timely fashion and under deadlines. And people have publication deadlines, and people have marketing deadlines, and people have release date deadlines, and all these kinds of things. And yet my neighbor just decided that they were going to do construction and didn't tell me. How dare they?
Oh my goodness.
So now I'm working. No, that didn't happen to me, but I hear it from a lot of people.
Oh yeah.
Where they're like, oh my God, the leaf blower. I had 2 chapters left, and the leaf blower has been going for 4 hours.
Oh God.
And you
That's
always
one
sort of
that's
have
always the
empathy for those
longest.
people. I know.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah. But I think also that goes back to not putting all your eggs in the same basket. I know that's an old saying, as well as you're never going to be able to get that opportunity if no one gives it to you, being the newbie. And so this is where I always tell authors what I'm casting and helping them with their casting projects and things like that. I say, okay, well, here's a new narrator. Don't put him as the hero or the heroine. Give them a side character, make it almost like a little multicasty kind of a thing, or have them read
right. So then the book doesn't ride or die on him, and you can sort of hear how he's doing, or
you hear, or exactly.
Yeah, totally.
And you hear the reaction of the listeners. They're gonna be like either intrigued or hell no. It goes one or two ways.
Yes, of course. I know,
you know?
Poor narrators. Yes.
You know, but then also talk to the production company. Hey, how was it, or how were they? You know, did they give you the files on time? Were there any, issues with, software? Are they still using 1980s equipment? I mean,
or their communication, that's always a big
yes.
deal.
Oh my God, yeah. So that's where I think that if you just, it's like when you want to try a cupcake, you don't shove the whole thing in your mouth, dude. You just get a small bite. Use a spoon or a
so
fork.
Challenging, especially with if you work a lot in the indie world. Sometimes you get booked a year in advance, sometimes for a project. I'm not saying you're fully booked, but you will get a project in 2023 and you're like, oh my God, I don't even know where I'm going to be in 2023.
It's nice to be wanted though.
Vacation. Yeah. Totally. And so you're like, I'm not going to turn that down. I'll deal with it then. And then you find out there's like a family wedding and you're like, oh my God, how could I have done that? It's a very surprisingly challenging aspect of becoming a narrator, of how you maintain your schedule and to leave room for sometimes, big, important books. You audition and then they want you to record like a week later. And you're like, how could this have happened?
Yeah. Or heaven forbid, the achoo that just happened is not just a dust in the air. It's a blown out sickness and now you sound like this, and you can't record,
Completely. So much unpredictableness of life goes into this and it becomes surprisingly stressful. But you also, like I said, can't predict any of those things. And you're right. Variety is the spice of life. I'm going to use another euphemism. Can't put all your eggs in one basket, but I'm sure we can come up with a lot of them. And I think that's what can maybe save you, is that you maybe try your hand at a lot of different genres if you're able, or maybe turn down something so that you have room for another. But it's so hard to feel like you have the courage to do that. I applaud people who seem to maneuver through that so easily. And I'm always like, damn, they are just killing it. They are doing such great work all the time. And it seems like they're just getting the best books. But, then you talk to them and they're like, I really wish I was doing more X, Y, Z. And you're like, yeah, it doesn't matter. Everybody feels the same way.
Yeah. Or like, I wasn't feeling that brave yesterday when I wrote that email saying, I'm so sorry, I can't do that book.
It's crazy.
Yeah, freelancing as someone that works in that, it's a interesting living where you don't ever want to say no, but you also have to know what your limits and your pros and cons are. And you also have to take into consideration the clients. Sometimes they may love you, you're going to love them, but there's going to be that accent that you're like, I can't do it. That's not in my box of tricks right now. And I don't have the time by the time this is being published to learn it.
To work on it. Yeah. Agree. I know.
And that's where your networking comes in.
Yeah. I've certainly had to do that. And I've certainly had to recently, and I'm sure this is reflective in the listenership and some of the books that are, currently happening and looking towards the future, but trying to get, diversity and be truthful in casting. I think that that's something that was always very tricky in the voiceover world because it was just a voice. So it didn't,
we didn't know what y'all looked like. We didn't know who you were.
Correct. And then people would make assumptions based on stereotypes of what a person of color should sound like, or what a Caucasian person should sound like, or what an immigrant should sound like, right? There were all these tropes that could sort of fill in the blank to create stock characters that weren't fully realized, that were, fitting some sort of position in the narrative to service the hero and the heroine, or, whoever. And we're really taking a step away from that and trying to have some truth and honesty because I think our narrators and other people in the voiceover world are becoming, you know, a little more recognized and are doing things like this, or going to
Book signings, yeah.
different events, or all this kind of stuff, where it now what you look like and where you come from makes a difference. And so it takes a while for things to catch up. And I think, sometimes, I always marvel, like, a book comes to me and, half the time, just, you've had so many narrators on here, so I'm sure your listeners are well aware, but like sometimes you audition, you're only given a snippet, you have no idea who you look like, where you come from. Sometimes they tell you an accent, sometimes you don't know, you just sort of do it, and then you get the book and they're like, here's all the things that come along with it. And then you read on page 50 and you're like, oh, I'm biracial. Wait a minute. And I am not biracial. So I would have thought, like, maybe the author or whoever had the audio rights would have put that into the notes for who to cast. And sometimes, I don't know, it's human error. It just falls through the cracks, or it's like you got hired for a series and it's like the third in the series and they never told you. And so it was like an easy, for the production house or the publisher that you're working with. And they're like, here's book 3. And then you're about to prep it. It's the same world, so you don't have to do nearly as much prep. And so you're, maybe a couple of days out from where you're going to record, and you start looking through it, and then you're like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
This is a person of color. And those kinds of things are happening. They've certainly happened to me a handful of times. And, as a freelancer, you always feel like, oh my goodness, am I going to go back to them and say, you want to be very sensitive. You don't want to accuse them, like, how dare you have hired me, when you just realize it was probably human error. They're dealing with hundreds of books. This is not personal. This is not anyway. So I think what it has done is given me a lot of empathy for all of the different hands that a project has to go through to be able to wind up on my doorstep. And then how many things can maybe, fall through the cracks in terms of information as it gets to me. And that's something, challenging. And I feel like I'm always working to get better on, to be as authentic as possible in my performances and in my preparation and in my communication with my, whoever's hiring me, and in my, counterpart, if I'm cast in a co-narration or a multi-performance. And it's just so interesting how things are changing in so many different ways. And I hope that the listeners recognize that, it's a bumpy ride, and, we're all doing the best we can, but also you're a freelance. And so it's hard to judge people when they accept a book, to know their reasons why. So it's hard. Sometimes you got to make rent.
Yeah. And I think that that's where having these sort of conversations, a lot of, there's been a lot more open doors, as romance likes to say, either close behind the scenes or open the doors. There's been a lot more open door conversations when it comes down to what it takes to make an audiobook and how many hands are touching it, and authors, this is what you need to do. I mean, Clubhouse has been a great app and meeting place for authors and narrators to kind of connect and have the conversations from, what you consider before thinking about getting an audiobook into production, and what does it take, and having those, I know that the Audiobook Empire is going to be having a session, and they did it so cutely. They're like, so you're having an audiobook baby, almost like a baby shower. And and this is what to expect when you're expecting an audiobook. And they're going to do this workshop where they're going to walk the authors through every single step, so they are in the know. Incredible. Yeah, because it's their baby, literally and figuratively. And they're, at the end of the day, it's their product that's we're adding a different layer from, we're adding a dress to it, or we're adding different shoes, accessorizing, but it needs to make the author, who is the owner of that product, happy. And there's a lot of stuff that was always done behind closed doors that did not allow the author to have any insight or say. I mean, it still happens in big publishing houses where the author doesn't even know an audiobook is being made because the rights
they don't own the rights.
Yep. Yeah. And so those are the kind of conversations I think are happening more out in the open. And authors are also talking amongst themselves and having these conversations with each other, and same thing with the narrators, and saying, hey, this works, this doesn't work, stuff like that is good, other stuff not so good, don't do that again, kind of a thing. And it's important to have the conversation. And I think that that's where the community is getting a lot better. There's still work to have, but they're getting better, which is always in the good,
Totally.
the positive direction to move. Even if it's slow, I must have it go
Totally. I
forward than
agree.
backwards.
I feel like almost every time that I get hired, I'm learning something new that, even if it's a run of the mill next project that I've been hired from this company or client multiple times. And I feel like it's still something always new that I'm learning. So it is ever changing, that is for sure.
That's actually a great attitude to have as a freelancer and as a person in general. I think that a lot of times individuals, whether it's corporate 500, Fortune 500 companies, and they're the executive VP that can do no wrong because he knows it all. And, anything else, there's always more to learn out there, whether it's a different way of doing something that you've been doing the exact same way for the past 10 years, adding a little bit of spice to this or a little bit more blend to that, and learning what those differences are and just keeping your skill set honed better. That I think is definitely something that a lot of the narrators, I think, are continuing to improve. And that's one thing that I've heard from them a lot when I had this chat with them is, I didn't know about this and I didn't know about that. And now, prepping is a lot easier because now I can color code. And others are like, oh, hell no, I'm not color coding shit. And so there's different ways of doing the exact same thing, right? All you're doing is prepping a book. How you go about it varies. And the same thing.
Always. I mean, everybody has a different process. I think one of the things that I'm constantly working on as a performer is letting the ego go, because that could be a big roadblock in general as we have these conversations with more narrators and more authors, and it can certainly feel a little overwhelming, like, well, I'm not working with that person and somebody doesn't like this, and you can have a lot of noise around you to maybe have that bad side of what social media or interactions can have, which is you can start to self-doubt, you can have imposter syndrome, you can feel like, well, somebody didn't like that, but somebody did like that, and you can kind of drive yourself crazy. And that's a lot of ego in there that's saying it has to be done a certain way. And I'm constantly working on trying to release that. And from the moment of where I am on any given day, whether I had a good night's sleep or I didn't, I sit down in my dark booth. I prefer a almost pitch black booth. And I begin on day one for where I am and, come to like an emotional center and then have the book take me and then release it. I think that's a hard thing to not get in your head about and feel like, oh, I didn't say that line right, or, oh, I should have gone back and done something, or, oh, that wasn't fill in the blank. And that's the ego talking, right? If you were doing your job, which I think everybody comes to it that way, if I'm being generous. And so from how that was led to that, and then you said that, and then that led to that. And so that's how the line came out. And so be it in that moment, and to shed it and to not be so, try to think so perfectionist or worried that somebody else did it a different way or speaks in a specific way. I feel like that can sometimes get you in your head in a terrible way.
Oh, absolutely. The comparisons between individuals, and I'm like, you guys should not be competing. Trust me, there's more than enough work for everybody.
There's enough room. There's only one you in the entire world. Mm-hmm. Nobody can ever be you. Yeah,
exactly. And that's good and bad. Because it's just
correct.
Because sometimes I'm like,
thank goodness there is only one of you, and then thank goodness there is only one of you.
Yeah. Exactly. And even in my case with having a twin, technically I'm still only one, even though I have a carbon copy of it out there. But it's fun times. But I think too that's where and I keep saying I think, but it's important to kind of put that ego aside, and that takes a lot. It takes a lot.
Daily work.
Daily work. But also it takes you admitting you have an ego. And some people don't do that.
Don't admit it. Absolutely.
Yeah. And they're up in there and I'm like, dude, you poopy still stinks up there. Okay. So check it. And it's just, learning that skill set of letting it go once you're done with it, because the perfection, and I think most of us have a perfectionist in ourselves, and how you could have done things differently.
That's why we're drawn to this kind of work. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But also seeing that, okay, how could I have done it differently in a better way, whether it's working smarter, not harder, maybe doing the prep work 3 days before versus the night before. You know,
and you're right. That is all about letting go of the ego, as opposed to reliving the thing that you did,
right,
letting that go, and then taking what you learned that didn't work and then moving on, and trying not to let that thing sit with you.
Learning it, implementing it, moving on.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah. And it's also like you're not going to always be the same. You know, one narrator is going to get cast more than you. Others have said it, you know, that, you know, someone else did it better than you. Yeah, but you know, we all have different ears. And this is also why there's like 5,000 types of red wine. Because we all like different ones. Somebody's going to
love me more than they love somebody else. For somebody, I'm their favorite narrator. And for somebody else, I am their least favorite narrator.
And that's okay.
And that's great. That's great.
Yeah. When everybody, that's what I always say, that when someone is busting out with, it's a 5-star review. Oh my God, the book is so great. Oh, the narrative. I'm going, I'm not going to believe shit you say, because not everything is a 5-star review and not everything is a great performance. And that's where you have to have that ego taken out and say, okay, well, what was it about it, my performance, that maybe wasn't up to par? And the author was like, well, maybe I didn't have to describe the dandelion into 16 pages. And we learn and we move on. And that's where that, you know, people just have to do it. And now we are living in a world where there's so many of you. I think there's a lot more now, obviously, because, you know, working from home. But just the concept of knowing that this is actually a possible gig, like you were saying before. I didn't know that you could get paid to read books. I did not know that you can get paid to narrate them or produce them, or hell.
I know. Have a whole business. Yes.
I mean, like, you want me to photograph and become a photographer to take hot pictures of guys? Shit, that would have been nice. I could do that. Yeah.
And yet at the same time, right, they've been, you know, the sort of like Fabio covers from, you know, the 70s and whatever, they've been in existence forever. And yet I never once thought, oh, somebody has to take those pictures, or like somebody has to write those books. Like somehow it just was never like,
it just magically appeared, I think, in our heads.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
Yes. It's so weird. Because I'm going, wait, you know, no, why wasn't I not aware of this? I was a reader as in high school. I knew about books. So how was I not aware of this?
You know, it's so funny, but I grew up listening. There was a company called, I don't know if it was called The Jabberwocky or Jabberwocky, but it was a theater troupe. I think they were from like the Pacific Northwest or something. I'm not sure. But they read all of the classics. So like Heidi, Little Women, Treasure Island, things like that. And I used to listen to those over and over and over. And those were full performances. These actors were like, you could tell they were even like very physical and things. Did you listen to these when you were younger?
No, but I want to look them up now and find them.
You know,
and
I was, you know, I've tried to Google search them as an adult, but they were only on tapes, because I think I'm probably a lot older than you are. And I was born in California. So I think they may have been like a West Coast kind of thing, because nobody else I knew, and maybe somebody who's listening here has more information than I do. But I've spoken about this a handful of times with like friends on the East Coast, and nobody grew up with this. So maybe it was just like a regional thing. And I was obsessed with those, but never, when I wanted to be an actor, did I think, oh, I want to do that. I can do that. Like, it never felt like that was something that was a job I could get. And I don't know how you find out about these things. I guess you just constantly ask and talk about people, or you have lunch with the friend of a friend of a friend, and she randomly tells you about an engineer who's looking to hire you.
Right? No, I think it goes back to a lot of the roles being more obscured, and the things that we knew about were those that were in our faces: teachers, doctors, nurses, police officers, firefighters.
Yeah.
We never stopped to think.
Tangible jobs. Yeah.
Yes. We knew about there was a farmer, but we didn't know there was a dairy farmer and a vegetable farmer. You know, we didn't know all those little details and the nuances that go with it. I mean, hell, even wine is technically considered farming if you're a winery.
Right.
And now, because we live in a world where www. fill in the blank is so helpful, that people are
Mhm.
starting to realize that there's all these different possible,
Communities available
communities.
to help guide you. I know, it's
Yeah.
incredible.
The couple of times
Incredible.
that I've done workshops in high schools for high schools that I've been asked to come in and do stuff. My husband is a teacher at a high school, and also with the libraries and things like that. Career day, because they're like, oh, you blog and you podcast,
So cute.
and I'm like, yeah, it's a lot of work. I'm not getting paid for any of those two things, by the way. Thank you very much. But
doesn't mean it's any less hard, any less work.
exactly. Absolutely. Sometimes it's even more. But I always say hey, did you know that you can get paid to read books? And all these little things that I've learned in the industry that are part of the industry as making it book, that from the writing process all the way to where it lands in your library, whether it's at home or literally a library. And the kids are like, what? No way. I don't have to be a doctor like my mom said. I go, no, sorry to blow that bubble. But no, you
interesting?
don't.
I
Yeah.
know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can
It's
have
incredible.
fun with it. Yeah, it's a good time, I think, that we're living in, where we have so much access to things. Unfortunately, like with anything, we have our bad apples. But at the end of the day, I think it's also making that conscious decision of stepping away when you need to step away, because it could get bad. But it's definitely something that we are living that is so great, where I can decide today if I want to listen to a billionaire or an alien or a shifter.
Right. I know. Isn't it crazy?
Yeah.
It's just crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I know.
It's fun though. It's fun. Even more so, it's funny too when I've had listeners bust out with, oh my God, Carly Robbins is so awesome. And CJ Bloom is phenomenal. And I love her in this and this. I'm going in my head, girl, you don't know. And they haven't put two and two together yet, whether because there was an accent or the tone of the book was different. And I'm going, but at the same time, I'm going, I love that you're so excited about Carly. And CJ is so awesome, isn't she?
I know, it's so funny, right?
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. It's a great community.
It's so fun. I know it is. I know.
And so one thing too, speaking of this community thing that we're doing and now we're kind of getting a little bit back to normal as far as, peopling and going out. You're going to be doing 2 signings/book conventions coming up.
Can you believe it?
I know.
I can't believe it. They'll actually be my first. I've never gone to any signing. I've never done any sort of industry event like this. I'm very nervous. Please be kind if you happen to be listening, and then you will meet me in person. I have no idea what to expect. I'm going in sort of bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
If you were So accents. We love accents, and we're suckers for them. I'm not gonna lie. What's your favorite accent to perform?
Oh, that's a great question. I think sometimes the easiest one is like a Southern accent, because it tends to be so much more lyrical. And I suppose it depends on which one, but I would say in general, like there's a musicality in the way that the words kind of sometimes, like one word sort of bleeds into the next, and it kind of has like a sort of sing-song as you kind of maneuver through. I think those might be fun, only because I think sometimes, there's like a sort of Southern accent understanding that somebody's going to kind of be a little bit more blunt, or maybe a little more of like an eccentric character. And so maybe part of that comes with the kind of character that is embodying that. I just did a book, a Kristen Higgins book, and they needed like an Appalachian accent, but like it was like an Appalachian on the Ohio border, and I had just done another something, so I felt really comfortable doing that, but wanted, to be rooted in like the behavior of the character, not make it a caricature kind of thing. And those characters were like so outlandish, and they were just a touch of it, and it was like ridiculously fun to be able to perform those. I don't know. I guess just great characters. Great characters make for great accents.
That is
so
true.
Hard to put a like a favorite kind of title on that, but I think maybe that's where I'm settling. Okay, that's where I'm settling for today.
Okay, perfect. Now on the flip side,
yes,
the hardest accent for you to perform.
I cannot do an Australian accent. I mean, that's not true. I can do like a couple of sentences and then my brain gets jumbled, and that's about it. And I can do it fair, like a very light something. It is the hardest. My brain just does not compute it. That was a book I had to turn down where
Yeah.
after I was cast, and I was like, you do know this is asking for an Australian accent, and I am not capable of doing an entire book that way.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
That was a good call though. Again, I mean, we touched on it before. It's either, I mean, you can try. The results
No,
might not
listen,
be the
I also not sure that I can do a British or like a generic British sort of accent. I don't do it that well. I do it like as a taste. And in the TL Swan series, one of them wound up being that. And I was like, I think you guys need to recast me. And it was a big conversation between the production house, the author, my co-narrator, everybody. I submitted like tons of samples because I was like, I want everybody to be very clear. This is what my limitation is. And it's not going to be like, she was rooted in the culture. There was no way I was going to be able to do that authentically. And everybody was okay with what I did. That the author wanted me to continue with the series, didn't want to, and it was done, you know, with plenty of time they could have recast. So, I mean, I have no idea. People probably loved or hated it. But that was an instance where that was definitely a conversation for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's definitely an ongoing conversation with the listeners too, as far as, yes, we love the accents. And yes, they're great, but sometimes you don't need to go all in. As long as you give me a hint.
It's distracting. Yes. Just a
yes.
little bit of something. I know. And it's a challenge to figure out what that slight something is, to give a hint that doesn't need to go more than that, because you love the voice and the character interpretation and all those things.
Yeah, I was a part of an author was asking about almost like a sensitivity reader, but she was still in the writing process. And me being Latina, one of her characters was going to be Latina too. And they were thinking about like certain words and things that I go, okay, bio of the character. Were they born and raised here in the States, or were they born and raised somewhere else and then traveled over here? Because that's a lot.
Right.
And
that's a lot right there, because there are plenty whose parents speak Spanish and they don't speak Spanish. I mean,
exactly. That's where I was going.
A wide range.
That was exactly where I was going.
The immigrant, and I would say that's probably like a very, very common immigrant experience, regardless of where your parents came from.
Yes.
To assimilate as fast as possible. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And then
complicated.
And so it turns out that she was born and raised here in the States, but they spoke Spanish in the house. And I'm like, okay, so you want her to speak Spanish in between, like a Spanglish thing?
Yeah.
And long story short, I go, just let her talk Spanish when she's really pissed off, or when she's saying something sexy.
Right.
And
because that's a character choice.
Yes.
And that's it.
Exactly. And I go, that's usually when my Spanish comes out, is when I'm pissed off.
Oh.
So
that's funny.
Or there's something loving going on. And it could be just even among friendships, or even like if I'm trying to describe a dish, but the words doesn't come out in English because there's just a little more drier. And then there's a Spanish word for it. Boom, there you go. And they're like, oh, that's cool. Yeah. Again, it goes back to just doing that little bit of research, but it does with the accents too. I'm like, not everybody is Mexican.
Right.
And not everybody has that, but it's good that you had that conversation with the production company and the author and the co-narrator and figured it out, I mean,
and I was lucky that all were willing participants, and I was able to have access to all of them, because that doesn't always happen. And then you're sort of left with like, what do I do? Yeah.
It's always good when that lines of communications are open. So here's a couple of fun questions for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
I know this might be weird, but when you're not working, what do you do for fun? Because you're always working.
I'm always working.
That's
but
why.
I will tell you that is not difficult. I cook and I bake.
Oh, nice.
And I dream about food. Oh yeah.
Oh, you're a foodie.
Oh, I'm a big foodie, but not like a fussy foodie. Like I don't always follow recipes. I like to read recipes and then sort of like riff on my own. And my most favorite thing to do is source ingredients. So I love to go to grocery stores And I love to go to specialty food markets and like walk up and down the aisle and look at everything that there is available. And I especially if it's like an ethnic, a particular like I'm in a Japanese grocery store, or I'm in a sort of any sort of food something, and they have a grocery store dedicated to that, I'm ecstatic, because it's generally things that I won't get in a generic
Grocery store,
large
yeah.
grocery store. And so they're ingredients that I never even knew existed, that kind of thing.
Those are
And then
fun.
how do I incorporate that into my food? I'm super into it. Yep. And I bake and I cook. So
Okay.
the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what's the Carly special when it comes down to
Oh my
desserts, like baking and then in savory stuff?
So I like to bake a lot of breads. I like to mix actually flavors. So I like to do a lot of the different flavors. So I like to do a lot of like herby. So like if I'm going to make a shortbread, I will probably do like a lemon and then thyme shortbread, or a lavender shortbread. So it's got a little salty, a little sweet, a little like floral kind of thing. I love to do that kind of stuff for my desserts. Or like I made this so I like to mix a lot of different like flours and things. So like an almond flour cake that's like maybe orange and thyme, or like rosemary and lemon, or something like that, where I'm doing like a little bit of like a lot of different flavor components. And then for when I'm cooking, I cook a lot of like Asian cooking, surprisingly, or like flares, but like a Jewish Asian kind of fusion in my own head. I try to really honor the ingredients. So like, soy sauce is so versatile, and it gives you like that salty umami, like really kind of like hits so many different parts of your palate. I love to add those kinds of things with some ginger, or I even just made, oh my goodness, what did I make? And I added like chaat masala because I had some Indian spices, and somebody was eating it and they were like, what am I eating? And I was like, I know, right? It like added all these like so many like mind-blowing sort of flavors. That is a total happy space for me, a great way to unwind. I know that I am putting like all my love and my emotions into the ingredients and the food, and I know that my friends and family are going to eat it. And then I live in an apartment building, so I give them to all my neighbors and my building staff. We live in a door. Oh yeah, I'm like, do you guys want X, Y, and Z? And they're like, sure, we'll take it.
That's awesome.
So I'm constantly giving away food. It's my most favorite thing to do. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Sounds like fun. Yeah. Especially like the lavender, those mixes, or those breads sound yummy.
Heaven. Yep, totally.
I'm a breadhead, so I'm like, ooh, let's try that.
Totally in it. I'm in it.
Mm-hmm. So when there's usually a song that comes up, and when that song comes up for an individual, it doesn't matter where they're at. If they're
they have to sing at the top of their lungs,
or dance, dance or sing to it. What's that song for you?
Oh my goodness. I mean, there are so many. I had said in the beginning that when we started this conversation, that I grew up doing musical theater, and I think that just gave me a love of all music. So I actually love all genres of music. And I can tell you, like in one sort of day, so I heard Hotel California. There were like some landscapers that were playing, and I was immediately singing that. Then I was listening to a Taylor Swift song, We Will Never Ever Get Back Together. And I was like, why am I screaming this at the top of my lungs? That all happened within like an hour. And then I think, what was the other song that just came up recently? Oh, I think it was a Fleetwood Mac song,
Nice.
Landslide. Like, how can you get wrong with Landslide? Doesn't everybody love Landslide? And I think I was like, and my daughter was looking at me like, why are you singing like a crazy lady over there? And then she had a smile on her face. So maybe she just accepted it. I feel like that all happened within like 6 hours of a day. And I was totally into all of them.
Oh, that's awesome. I'll get a copy of your playlist. That'd be fun.
I love playlists when they come, speaking of in books. I do the Bergman Brothers series. Super talented author, and she does playlists, and they greatly inform how I listen to them religiously before I record.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I know. I love it when the
that
authors
next
can
chapter.
provide us
Mhm.
a little bit more of that insight, whether it's the
Yep, where
characters
their
or
mindset is at, or like what
the
the
emotion.
chapter is going to. Yeah, exactly. I love it. Gives me a little bit of direction.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I even talked to an author that listens to the playlist, and the conversation kind of goes in the cadence of the song.
That's so cool.
I
What
know.
artistry. Oh my
I
goodness,
know. It's like,
talent.
wow.
Yeah, super cool.
I'm like, good thing. I just want the finished product. Thank you. I let you do the work.
I'm happy to let you do the work, and I
Yep.
will just listen. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, exactly. Because that's a lot of work. But when you guys enjoy it, that's not really what you consider work. So it's fun
Totally.
time. Yeah. All right. So we have Hotel California, Landslide, and Never Gonna Get Back Together by Taylor Swift. Perfect.
And I wouldn't say those are like my favorite songs in the world, but I certainly know the lyrics, and they come on and you're like, why am I singing crazy?
Yeah. No, that's good though. It's good to know. I'll add that to my playlist. So next time we hang out in public and you hear that, boom, I'm gonna have a Carly performance.
We'll make eyes at each other, and that's the way it'll go.
Perfect. Yeah, that's my goal. Because people are like, why are you asking them that question? I have a plan. It's okay. I'm evil and diabolical that way, darling. But no, it's fun. I like knowing those kind of things because I'm not the only one. And sometimes when I listen to a song, I'm like, oh, I remember that. Cardi likes that song.
I know. It's an emotional experience. Music gives you an emotional experience. I totally feel that.
Totally. So you work with words a lot. All day long. And but what's your favorite word? Separate from favorite curse word, because that's the second part of this conversation.
Oh, got it. One of my favorite words is aphrodisiac.
Nice.
And we use it a lot in narration, and I pronounced it wrong one of the first few times that I said aphrodisiac with like a j, one of those examples of like something that you only read previously, but it's aphrodisiac. And it's just such a like, I don't know, it has such like a whimsical, when it comes up in the word, when it comes up in my narration, that's always a fun word to be able to perform.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So what's your favorite curse word?
Well, I have two. I like fucking shit.
That is awesome. Because you can combine the two together and you have another,
I mean, the world is your oyster with those two. You can't go wrong.
Yeah. That works. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Before we go, can you tell us what you're currently working on? What's coming up next for you? Projects and stuff that you can talk about?
Totally. I have a wide variety. I have a children's story that I'm doing, which I'm super excited about. I have a magazine short story that I'm doing. I have the next in the TL Swan coming up this summer. And I think do I have anything else super like top secret? I don't think I have anything top secret coming up, but I'm finishing up a couple of series, and I have like a wide variety of genres coming up. And I think I did this, I did a series, an Audible original something coming up. I don't even think I can talk about it yet because it hasn't been released. That was super awesome to be a part of that. So I don't know, I'm trying to really get my hands on all different kinds of audio projects, see where this medium takes me. How can it expand? How can I use my voice? What are interesting things that I can do and be a part of? And then just be super grateful when I get cast.
Yeah. Well, I know that we get excited as listeners when we're like, a book's been announced. Great. Okay. And then we know we have to wait for the cover reveal.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Well, that's a good cover. And then I have an author that then DMs me and says, we're going to announce it soon. I'm like, okay, good. Because that was my next question. Who are the narrators?
I know that's always fun when they do a little tease, right?
Yeah. I mean, like I'm probably the one that kind of created that marketing plan for that one author. But at the same time, I'm going, who did you decide on?
Tell me. I can't wait.
Yeah. Because like that song, I can't wait. Totally dating myself there. But anyways. But thank you so much for being part of this year's Audiobook Lovin Series. Love talking to you. Thank you.
I am thrilled. I'm so excited that I was asked and that I was able to be here. I'm so grateful for you, like I said, and for this community, because you bring us closer to our fans and give us so much information that we didn't have before, and open up a world of communication where we can all just talk about our love of audiobooks. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, no, it's great. I totally appreciate you guys wanting to do this and willing to, and I appreciate the trust that comes into play with that as well. Because we're talking and that's a lot,
It's a lot.
yeah. So I appreciate that. But thank you for hanging out with us and
Oh,
everyone
my
that's
pleasure.
listening. Thank you, Carly, for being part of this year's Audiobook Loving Series. Everyone, thank you for hanging out with us today, and we hope you've enjoyed this chat as well as the series. Make sure to follow her on social media if you have not done so yet. You will find their links on the Audiobook Loving 2022 series page over at Viviana, Enchantress of Books. And until next time, happy listenings.
Thank you for joining us in the Audiobook Lovin Series, hosted by Viviana, Enchantress of Books. We hope you have enjoyed this episode, as well as the series. We've included audio samples of our guests' work within the post for you to check out. Please make sure to visit the main page, link within the post, to learn more about the series, the authors, and the narrators. Please consider leaving a review wherever you listen to the series if you enjoyed today's episode. Make sure to follow us on our social media platforms and subscribe to the Viviana Enchantress of Books newsletter. Until next time, happy listening. Audiobook Lovin hopes you've enjoyed this program.